Thank you, Matt, for being the first great guest of the show. Can you please introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit about who you are, what you do, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Matt Meis. I live in Wisconsin, and I've been in IT for the last 15, 20 years. I started as help desk for friends and family, but shortly after college started doing development. I built programs at an insurance company and then switched industries into finance and started building a wire fraud detection system for a large US bank. That taught me a lot about cybersecurity and fraud and really got me interested in both of those disciplines. And so I switched from just doing development to doing more threat hunting and finding new unknown attacks that were happening against the institution or its customers.
Cool. And so you're now working in cybersecurity.
Yep. Now I'm in cybersecurity. I taught cybersecurity for a couple years, and now I'm doing cybersecurity and fraud at a credit union in Wisconsin.
You just recently published a book. Tell us a little bit about what the book is about. And also, I was curious to know what was your goal with the book and if you felt that you achieved what you were trying to achieve with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at my heart, I'm an educator and I'm passionate about fraud and cybersecurity. And I kept repeating myself quite a bit to individuals, again, a lot of friends and family, and then to folks at conferences. So I thought, why not put it all in one place? So that's a little bit easier to distribute that knowledge. I think that the the most power from knowledge comes in sharing it. So that's why I put the book together. Um, and hopefully you'll be able to get that message out to more folks, especially those seeking to find it instead of just me seeking others to share it with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I read the book. I found it interesting, and I can tell you that I've learned a lot. Um, I think some parts, obviously, I knew a little bit more, and some parts, I it really opened my mind to looking at my security online. So this conversation will be also, especially for me, a lot of questions that I have, a lot of things that maybe I would like to understand better, and hopefully will be useful for our viewers and listeners as well. First of all, I didn't know there was a difference between Internet of Things and smart devices. And in my mind, they kind of were the same thing, or I didn't see the difference. Can you tell us a little bit about what these two things are and how they are vulnerable?
Yeah. So I kind of, some people use them synonymously, and a lot of times they are the same types of devices. If you have a webcam connected to your Wi-Fi router and it's accessible on your phone outside of your network, it's an internet connected device, probably also a smart device. Maybe you can pull up a recording on a video Alexa or something. That being said, I have a lot of different smart home devices in my home that are not directly connected to the internet. So there are local hubs that only work inside the home. You don't have to necessarily have it networked with your wireless devices. For example, they can use Bluetooth, Z-Wave, Zigbee, those kind of items, and they don't have to be directly connected out to the internet. So that gives you an option to help secure those devices a little bit better. I think from a security standpoint, the biggest problem with most of these devices is that they're limited based on the hardware that's available. So when you're trying to build a very, very small water leak sensor, for example, you might not have a lot of power. You don't have the luxury of encrypting all the traffic. And so there's very open communication over a local network. And if that's exposed to the internet, there could be a lot more that goes on there. One thing that we've seen a lot with webcams, for example, is just people not updating them and the software not updating itself. And then if they're available online, people can log in and watch those webcams live. So that's where you get into the risk of it.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking to think that someone could do that. Um, you're talking about the hardware. Is there a difference from where the device is coming from? Like, should I pay more attention at a certain jurisdiction or a certain brand? You maybe know some brands that we should be aware of.
Yeah, so there are a lot of really cheap components that you can buy. For example, Wise cameras. They make very very cheap, awesome quality as far as picture quality goes. But there have been some security researchers that have looked at data in those cameras and has said, hey, this is actually connecting back to Chinese IP addresses. Is is that potential for looking for an update because that's what the manufacturer is, or is it sharing some information with that manufacturer or the Chinese government? It's uncertain, and so you kind of get what you pay for. You're either paying with the data or your security, or you're paying for the product in full. And there are some that are much better, and there are some that are closed circuit, and that helps make sure that you're not having that exposure.
I see, absolutely. Um, I think that apart from these devices, um, that part of your book made me also think about um, how nowadays we do a lot of biometric verification. I think that definitely I've been working my current career is all in anti-money laundering compliance, and there is a lot of my clients or just in general reporting entities, they use biometric tools to verify the identity of their customer. And I was wondering about your insight on this type of tools, especially in terms of security, in terms of the company selling the tools, holding the data, and sharing your such a personal information of yourself like your biometrics.
Yeah. So first off, I think it's an important piece of security. So ignoring how the companies are holding it, we'll maybe get to that in a little bit. But from a verifying who somebody is, you can really only do it in three different ways. You can do it based on something that person knows, like a password or a PIN. You can do it based on something they are. So biometrics, that's the definition of something you are. So you can think about facial scan, thumbprint, ocular scan, whatever that may be. And then the last item is something they have. So something they have might be a physical phone, a token, and something to that effect. So you really only have those three options. If you want to have multi-factor, you have to use at least two of those. And so if you don't already have something given to your customers to verify that they had this before they called in, biometrics is your only alternative solution outside of the something you know, which is a password. And so I think it's key for verification of individuals because it's really hard to know who somebody really is. And as we look at biometrics, it's getting harder and harder with AI. You're seeing voice being duplicated and doing a really good job at even beating some of the people in the voice space to say, yeah, that's the same person, even though it's a computer talking. So yeah, critical on the identifying piece. As far as the companies holding them, I've given my biometrics out to a million different places, and I have not seen a breach yet. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have one, and that doesn't mean that they can't be used in a malicious way. But most of the biometrics, you have to. It's just uh, we'll just use a fingerprint. It is what your fingerprint looks like, right? To still get to verify your fingerprint and to do it live, there's certain liveness factors, and we've seen this with fraud too. Don't just take a photo of your face. Take a photo of your face and make sure that it can move, and that helps. That helps beat some of these things where they might have it on file, but they can't recreate it.
You touched upon AI and voice reproduction and stuff like that. I saw some of the deep fake and some of those programs that reproduce voices, and my first thought was fear. Just like this is how are we going to deal with that? I'm quite concerned of what the future will hold for us for the AI used for for identity theft and for fraud and stuff like that. Can you either confirm my fear or reassure me that things are in place to protect us?
I agree with you and I disagree with you. So yeah, I too was a little afraid on the security side of how much audio is out there about me that someone could use and recreate my voice, and can that recreation of my voice fool a security detection system or not? Right now, some detection systems can't tell the difference. Some can. I've seen specific uh, vendors actually tout that, hey, this will detect an AI voice duplication outside of just using a voice modulator or something like that. So there are some that are doing a really good job, but is that voice good enough to convince my grandmother or my dad or someone in my family that it is me that's calling them? Right? They don't have any AI detection on their phone to say that's not Matt on the other end. And so that, I think, is our bigger worry, is that you could have people spoofing a number of a loved one or of a colleague at work and then use a AI clone of their voice, and it sounds and seems realistic enough where you might take action to change wire details or to uh, release a new password for a user. And that would be my bigger concern, where we don't have a machine looking at it and people are trying to decide the difference between the two.
Okay, that helps me and don't.
Yep.
Um, the I think for mostly. So you think what I'm hearing from you is that you think it could happen to me today, that my brother calls me and it's actually a computer voice. Is that could happen to me today?
Absolutely. If their voice is out there in the public, 11 Labs needs about 30 seconds to 2 minutes of voice to recreate a voice. So, and I've seen some that say 15 seconds is all they need. I honestly, the more data you have, the better. But any voice that's public out there, you feed it in, even a couple minutes worth, and you get a pretty realistic voice. Especially when you think of the phone call quality in certain areas, you can't always hear the person very well anyway.
That makes me think of the skeptical mindset that you touch upon also in the book, of just, if this happened, it might even happen in reverse, to be honest, because having my YouTube channel, I'm sure that I have much more of my voice online than what my brother will have, because I don't think he has much of himself recorded. But let's imagine in reverse. I think the skeptical mind here will be, oh, you asking me some money. Um, what was the name of our pet when we were children? Or just, do you remember where we used to live? What was the name of the street? Like this type of um, questions to see if the person knows what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, it's looking for those behavioral things and that authentication of something they know. Absolutely. I think, especially with AI created voices, inflection can be off, pausing can be off, humor, right? So how many times have you laughed? If they say something that's funny, how does that AI voice respond? Like if you type in ha ha ha, it literally will ha ha ha. It doesn't laugh like a normal person. And so there's emotion and pausing and behavior even in just your voice that can be detectable. And then like you mentioned, someone's asking for money, they're acting differently, those sentence structure is different, and so you might still feel something is off.
I think I was born with obviously with no internet, but the internet came into my life that I was pretty young, and lots of people younger than me were born with the internet. So I feel that we have skepticism to a certain degree, and I feel that not I don't believe everything that is online. I'm sure I have my own bias, of course, but I try to apply that skeptical mindset that I hope it will help me uh, with detecting scam, even deep fake voices and stuff like that. But when I think of the generation of my parents and the generation of my grandparents, I just don't see them to be prepared. Like, I don't know how to explain to them that just because something is online, um, it's true. So, how do you deal with that?
So I've dealt with that a lot. And it's also true for just people that don't have a skeptical mindset. So even peers don't always have the same skepticism online that I think we do. I too started without internet, and we kind of had to troubleshoot ourselves. We had to change config files on the computer. We had to troubleshoot, and we had to really find the right thing on the internet. I remember as a kid downloading music illegally and realizing half the things I downloaded weren't even music; they were just worthless. And right, so it's like looking back at that and knowing, okay, well, I had to learn the lesson pretty early so that I could use my time more effectively online, especially since it tied up the phone line, right? So I think that our generation is actually a little bit unique in both the generation before and after us because of those trials of when the internet was still pretty young and new and what happened then versus now. There's a lot of things that repeat, scam wise, for example. Dealing with parents, though, and those that are not skeptical, it's kind of comes down to a few different things. And it's one, it again, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Most people repeat that a million times, and then people still fall for it, right? So the next thing is urgency. If anything's urgent, good or bad, ignore it. It's not important. Except for Windows updates, please do those. Chrome updates, those are the hard ones where it's like, here's where the update will show, and it's don't click on an ad related to it, but specifically look in these areas of your computer. So, yeah, ignore urgency, and basically, if you weren't looking for it, it's just trying to distract you.
I think that generation is probably the one that it worries me the most, especially watching um, also things like catfishing program or people falling for um, romantic scam type of thing. There's also lots of younger people, but I feel that sometimes the older generation are more prone to get in those type of situation. That's my feeling at least.
Totally agree. I think when you look at the older generation there's two factors that are going to make them more likely for those scams. One of them is that they may be more lonely just because there may be less people near them as often. And then second off is that they may have more capital, more money to spend on a scam.
What would you say your experience are the trends or the most popular typology of scams that you encounter?
Oh man, I think that really varies by the year. And when we think about, so romantic scams, I think are just the same. They've become longer time windows though. So I've seen romantic scams where they don't ask for anything for a month or two. They're just building a relationship for a month or two, and then they say, for example, this is kind of a pig butchering one, but they would say, "Hey, I've been making a lot of money on this investment app. You should try it." And the whole app itself is the scam. So it's a malicious app on the marketplace. That person goes out and downloads it. They don't follow a link. They don't click on anything. They don't give their password away. They download an app and they put money into it. And at that point, their money's gone, regardless of what the app says on returns. And so that to me is kind of the craziest one, because there wasn't a phishing, there wasn't any information given back to the original source of who recommended the app. So I think that's kind of where romance scams have gone. They're trying to be a little bit more tricky and just slyly dropping in malicious things that the user can then go look at themselves later.
It sounds like a big investment in terms of time of resources to nurture the relationship with a victim for a month or two.
Last week tonight is they're on YouTube and HBO, and they talked about this specific example with pig butchering, and they end up, the scammers themselves, the people contacting the romance scam victim, are basically slaves. They were captured and then they're forced to do this work. So while it is a large time commitment, they're being forced to commit the scam on behalf of the person that has them basically locked up. And so while it does take a long time, they just have to get a few that hit, and they could get hundreds and thousands of dollars. So I think those are they're changing a little bit. The other scams, I think a lot of the phishing is just based on what the current news is. So plenty of different wars going on right now, and then Olympics is coming up. We just finished tax season, so I think that those are just going to continue to change. Whatever the most recent news article is, that's the bait.
In what way? What do you mean? How can they use the Olympics?
Yeah, so if they say, "Hey, do you want to have live access to the Olympics for free? In the next 3 months, here, to sign up for a free account, or use your Google account to log in." And it's so they're just getting credentials, getting people to whatever will get them onto the site, and there's gonna be plenty of people looking for where can I watch the Olympics today, and if the first thing is a Google ad that looks legitimate, that's gonna be hard.
Everywhere I look, it seems to be um, it seems to be the hottest topic on scam and on fraud and things like that. Is it the pink butchery type of scheme, the one you mentioned before of downloading the app? Is that how it works?
That's one example of it. When I think industry wide, when we say pig butchering, what we're saying is we're going to assume all the victims are pigs, and we're going to hit them with lots of different types of scams over time, and basically harvest as much as we can from that individual victim. So re-hitting a victim after they've been victimized once, or trying to victimize them in multiple ways at the same time through multiple financial channels, multiple instruments, multiple scams. That's the general definition, in my opinion, of a pig butchering scam. The one that he talks about is just very specific around romance scams.
What do you think it goes through the mind of a victim once they've been victimized one? Um, not to be a victim blamer or to in any way be disrespectful of people that very unfortunately fall for this type of scams. But once you've been scammed once, um, how can they be scammed again? Wouldn't they be more alert or more, um, you know, suspicious of everything?
So we see that with a subset of victims. And then it basically, if you've been scammed once, the likelihood of you being scammed again is very, very high. Over 50% of people that are scammed once get hit with more scams, whether they fall for them or not. Slightly smaller percentage don't fall for them. But again, a majority of them, if they get hit again, do fall for that scam. And it's usually a different scam, right? So completely, maybe they got hit by a romance scam, and now they're just getting a phishing email about the Olympics, like we talked about earlier, or they're getting hit with an investment scam opportunity or work from home opportunity. Especially if you see victims that basically drain their accounts, they've exhausted all money, they're looking for cash quick. The fraudster usually knows they're out of money, and so they'll retarget those same victims and saying, "Hey, we have a great work from home job opportunity for you. You just need to handle these finances," and they basically become a mule without really knowing that they're a mule. And so they can reuse them in different schemes, and eventually it will hurt them because the bank's going to pick up on the money laundering eventually. So they end up getting hit again as a victim, as part of a scam, instead of just being the main focus of the scam.
I was interested about when you talk about identity theft. I think that we have touched upon a little bit, obviously, but if you can explain just the dynamics, I think it would be important or useful to think about some practical dynamics of identity theft that can be useful to be aware of.
Yeah, I think so. It's a pretty broad topic. I think when we think about how we can protect ourselves, there's a lot of specific actions that individuals can take to help reduce the effect of an identity theft. First off, everyone in the United States that was above 16 within the last 10 years already had their identity stolen. It just hasn't been used yet. So Equifax, I think, had a breach, and basically social security number, birth date, name was all in that breach. And so that data is more or less public data for fraudsters to dip into and use. So I have identity theft insurance. It will monitor my identity online. It will tell me if someone, takes out a loan. Very similar to looking at your credit report, but it's going to alert me and be more actionable than just I have to go run my credit report. So that's one thing I'm doing to try to protect my identity. The other things you can do is a lot of times if people are stealing your identity, it's still going to go to your physical address. So knowing what you're getting in the mail. USPS informed delivery in the United States is amazing. I'm sure they have this in other areas of the world. When you look at basically in the US, we get a picture of our mail before it gets delivered. So I know every envelope and box that's coming to my house, and if it doesn't show up that day, something got stolen. This is an opt-in service, so not everybody knows about it or is doing it, but it is valuable from a mail theft perspective, because that's one of the ways people can steal identities or fill out a loan and then just go steal that mail so that it doesn't alert the victim.
About the physical mail that can be stolen, wouldn't be like why some companies they still do the mails, physical mails like that. Do you think it would be safer to move away from physical mail and relying more on online?
So the physical mail thefts I'm talking about are not to get the stolen identity. They're to hide that the identity was stolen already. So let's say they steal an identity, they apply for a loan, and then due diligence of that financial institution says, hey, I'm going to mail this to the address on your driver's license, which is the real address. And now that loan application or whatever it is gets mailed to me, not the fraudster. So they need to steal that before I see it and get notified, and so that they can confirm it with the institution that they are real.
I was thinking of like, for example, some providers might have like a membership number or some of my uh, details that the fraudster may use for stealing my identities. But okay, I'm on the same page here. I'm back.
It could be the other way around, but it's just not as often where they're stealing mail for the sole purpose of identity theft. I have seen them stealing mail for the sole purpose of getting checks to wash them and then write their own checks, and that's pretty common place. Depending on the country, checks are more prevalent than others, but I personally hate checks.
I discovered recently that other countries still have checks because in my life I've never touched a check, made a check, been paid with a check. That's not part of my reality at all. And here in New Zealand, we even discontinued checks in 2021. So nobody that's been doing checks for the past 3 years. And I was quite surprised to discover that the United States, for example, and other countries still use checks.
Yep, it's annoying. I just can't believe that we allow you to write a name on a piece of paper with your bank account details and give it to somebody else, and everything will just work itself out. Pretty it's a very old technology for moving money. There's lots of other options, and here we are. So yeah, that's frustrating.
But here again, maybe those older generations like them or use them, are resistant to change.
Yeah, there are some options. There are some times where the alternatives aren't there. um, a check is as good as cash in some instances. But yeah, there are just some people that don't want to change, both on the business side, where that's what they accept as cash or check, and then on the consumer side, where they just always paid all of their bills via check, and they continue to do that.
I interrupted you on the identity theft. Please go on. Thank you for clarifying on the postal.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in the U.S., look up USPS informed delivery, and you can get pictures of your mail. Um, Identity theft monitoring again is huge, and then at least looking at your credit report every so often to know that nothing new was out there. Finally, freezing your credit. Here in the U.S., we have 4 different institutions where you need to freeze your credit with. There's actually more, but there's the big 4 that you need to freeze it at. And then once you've frozen your credit, you can't. No one can apply for a new loan. I think that's the biggest issue with identity theft is new loan creation, and then you're on the hook for that loan.
I'm happy to have you on the line and ask you all my techie questions that I always want to know. Topic VPN. I know it's a big thing. Also, sometimes for immigrants like me that wants to watch TV from the home countries, or at least TV on the native language, but just in general VPNs to protect yourself in public networks. And I found very interesting the chapter in which you talk about that. And my question is about, is there any merit in having a VPN for your private network when you're at home with your Wi-Fi?
So there's one point I talk about in the book quite a bit because it's confused, is that there's proxies and VPNs. And when we think about most people, the reason that they might use a VPN service is to change their country of origin, to make it look like they're logging in from Australia, UK, New Zealand, wherever that's not their current location. That is really more of a proxy service, right? You're sending your data through somebody else to get to a specific service. You might be doing it through a real VPN, but a proxy, if you just have a proxy service, all that they're doing is routing your traffic through their server. A VPN service will encrypt your traffic as they're routing it through their server. So when we think about corporate VPNs, for example, when I connect to my VPN at work, I am now on the corporate network. Any traffic I have will go through the corporate network out to the internet or out to our corporate assets internally. When I connect to a VPN on my personal computer, and that VPN is, let's just say NordVPN, or Google, Apple VPN, whatever it is, my traffic is encrypted to Apple, Google, Nord's public network, and then it forwards that traffic on to wherever I'm connecting to. So the biggest difference between the two is that a VPN is encrypting your traffic, a proxy is not. And most people that want to just look like they're coming from somewhere else will use a free proxy, and those can be pretty dangerous because a lot of the free proxies, they're not, you're paying with something else. You're paying with your data, because any traffic that's going through their system, in theory, they could be a man in the middle. They could decrypt your traffic, view it, and then re-encrypt it and send it on its way. And that could be actually more dangerous for people. So using legitimate VPNs, known VPNs that go through secure facilities, I've seen a lot of VPNs that they go through specific locations that do not that have specific regulatory reasons where they can't encrypt data or they have to decrypt it, and that could put your data at risk. So I always recommend Nord, Google, Apple VPNs. There's probably others, but those three are really great as far as adding security. Do you need it at your house? I would say no. Because your router is encrypting traffic between you and the router. There's no additional encryption needed. And then when you're going to a website, any website that is HTTPS is encrypted. So your traffic directly from them to you is encrypted, and vice versa. The reason that it becomes an issue in public spaces is because you don't know exactly what you're connecting to, right? If I say I'm going to connect to Starbucks Wi-Fi, and the Starbucks Wi-Fi is truly called just Starbucks, and I connect it to Starbucks Wi-Fi, I'm actually connecting to Hacker Joe, and Hacker Joe is forwarding on my traffic, and they could be stealing any information that happens between me and them. And so a VPN would solve that problem because it would encrypt the traffic and they wouldn't be able to decrypt it.
I want to repeat to you what I understand, so you tell me if I am correct. With my router at home, when let's say I send an email for work to a client or something, the because I'm using a home, my private router, my email is encrypted and only the person that I'm sending the email to will read it. Is that correct?
Yes, because let's just say your home router has a password on it. Without that password passphrase, you can't decrypt any traffic that's wireless in the air. So when you're connected directly to your router, any of that traffic couldn't really be inspected past where the IP address that the email is getting sent to. So yeah, no need to use a VPN for additional security in any situation where you know for sure you're connecting to the correct router.
Is there something else that you want to share or that you think we have not covered for this conversation that you would like our listener and viewer to know about?
So nothing specific. I was looking to just mention a couple aspects about the book and then a couple other projects I'm working on. So I'll hold this up. I know you can't necessarily see me, but everyone can now on the channel. This is Survive Online. This is the book that we've been talking about. And in this book, there's kind of three things that I wanted to put in there to help folks. And the first one is a story. The story in each chapter helps you connect with the content and really get into what's happening. And I found that's how I connected to a lot of lessons growing up. The next thing is I want people to take action. And so there's a lot of resources, and you might have seen some of the resources that are in the book. I also link to a companion website, learncybersecurity.net, and that has additional resources and is being added to over time as I find more items that relate to topics covered in the book. So it's kind of a living resource at this point. And then the last item is that I have infographics in every chapter, and that helps you to use this as a reference in the future. So it's really helpful to go back and say, hey, there's this thing about identity theft. Let me just understand that better, or what was that thing I should remember.
You want to talk us also about your other project you mentioned?
Yeah, I do some consulting on the side. I run tabletop simulations for security teams and help people solve fraud issues. And depending on the organization, some of that is free and some of that's paid. So I just like helping people solve problems in this area. So if people are looking to, let me know. I'll help you out.
Absolutely. I'll put all of your contact details in the description of this video so that viewer that want to know more about what you do or want to get in touch for your help, they will know how to get to you. So I'm going to get to my last question. If a person that is listening to us today find what you do interesting or maybe something that they want to do, what would you suggest they do to approach a career in your field and move on in your field?
Yeah, if you're looking, so I will say there's two different paths: fraud and cybersecurity. Getting into fraud, there's not a defined way in yet. It's to me still an evolving field. For cybersecurity, it's maybe 5 or 10 years ahead of fraud in that respect, and now there are even associates programs for cybersecurity to help people get their foot in the door. And I recommend looking at those 2 year institutions to get started. You'll really understand if you like it or not. It will get you the basics of IT, especially those that want to start in cybersecurity. Start looking at IT jobs, help desk type jobs. That's a really great way to start breaking into IT and then eventually cybersecurity.
Thank you for your time, Matt. I appreciate the conversation with you today. I learned even more about cybersecurity and how to protect myself. I hope this conversation is useful also for our listener. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fun, and I appreciate you having me on.